Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review Last Night in Soho. This is the sixth film from Edgar Wright, and here we find the director delving into psychological horror. The film finds a Thomasin McKenzie enamored by the 60s and the fashion scene therein, taking off to London to pursue her dream. That's all I want to say because the film goes through like this roller coaster of genres, especially like second half and on. This had a great trailer. It made me really pumped for the movie. It even made me predict it for Oscars. It convinced me that this was like in the vein of, Promising Young Woman and Black Swan, and that Edgar Wright could have his time. So where do we land on that? Oh, we'll just keep talking and then eventually you'll know. I think this movie started out fantastic. Edgar Wright, I think stylistically has been growing as a filmmaker throughout each film that he's done. I think with this movie, there's the most thought put into the visuals and the cinematography that I've seen in any of his movies. The shot where they're dancing and they're like swapping out with Matt Smith. There are a lot of shots that impressed me here, and also things that Edgar Wright did like with the cinematography in combination with the editing, where like the camera would move a little bit and then the next shot would be like moving, like it was all planned out. Yeah, that's definitely like his talent, and his forte is creating a visually striking and interesting work and using editing and sound to achieve that. But the cinematography had so much movement in it, and also color. I mean, there was a lot of like really cool lighting choices, and in the trailer I was like, film school lighting where you just like put a purple gel and then you put a green gel and you just say action. But it was much more than that. So I'm very impressed with the cinematography, the editing, the sound design was really cool in this movie. There were a lot of different effects that they did that felt specific to each scene. I was just impressed with like all the different creative choices that Edgar Wright and his team were putting into this. I thought there was a really interesting foundation here because it's about this young girl who glamorizes the past, and that's something that like we tend to do in the West, and it's like, why do we do that? Like there's definitely a role for it. And so like that was really fertile ground for this film. I thought for the first half it was doing a pretty good job at like showing how she's introduced to this world and how it changes. And then the film sort of went downhill for me, given that that was my main like point of interest, and I thought like kind of the core of the movie. I felt like we figured out what we needed to know about that subject pretty quickly. And then once we figured it out, once it was like pretty clear what it was going for, and it became very like brutally clear, it just sort of hit the brakes, I think, on that exploration and went like full funhouse horror thriller show. Once that element of the story went away, a lot of other things started crashing down for me too. They started telling you, what's happening as it sort of became this mystery, which I wasn't really on board with. And then the thrills themselves to me became like very kind of overdone and like cacophonous. The horror, which I thought was really scary the first couple times they like utilized this sort of monster, started to become like a little grating and irritating after a while. I don't know exactly where I land on this, but it did feel like it was almost counterproductive in the way that it didn't pull back from this subject of like violence towards women, and actually really like leaned into that in some places where I felt like it was shocking, but not in like the way it wanted me to be shocked, because the movie overall is like having a really good time. Putting it into this like terror funhouse like didn't work as well for me. I think that like the whole dangers of glamorizing the past thing, like you were saying, is really interesting, but unfortunately that idea only goes so deep, and like you said, there's a point at which it stops developing. I also felt like the main character kind of had these lessons that she needed to learn like happening to her. Whereas I look at a movie like Black Swan, where the character has all these things going on psychologically and they influence her reality, and then she makes decisions in reality that influence like the psychological stuff. But in this movie, it didn't feel like she had that much going on in the real world where she was making crucial character decisions that were shaping the way that her psychological state was playing out. It did feel like it lost sight of the character a little bit. Although Thomasin McKenzie, really, really good. This is the perfect kind of thing that I want to see Thomasin McKenzie in. She completely sold me on the character's personality and like her sort of shyness. Yeah, I think she ate this up. She just seemed like maybe she is temperamentally on the reserve side, but you didn't feel that coming through or like holding back her performance here. I feel like she went in all kinds of directions and you saw a lot of range from her. This is my favorite performance of hers since Leave No Trace. She's so well cast here because she looks kind of like Audrey Hepburn, and she goes like full scream queen. I loved her performance. It was probably my favorite part of the movie. And Anya Taylor-Joy is really good as well, and I was actually kind of expecting that she would would steal the show, but her character is such a like extension of Thomasin McKenzie that I felt like Thomasin McKenzie held the spotlight throughout the whole movie, and I liked Anya Taylor-Joy too. The second half of this movie, I think a lot of people seem to be kind of agreeing that if they have problems, that's where they start to happen. There's a lot that happens in the second half. Like, it's a lot. Yeah, and I don't think that people are going to have the same problems, because I can see so many different areas where this movie goes a little wrong. The scares started to get like really wacky, and the first time that there was a totally like wacky horror scene, I was pretty on board with it, but then it became a little too much for me. The type of like monster that they were using, I wasn't really that much of a fan of. I didn't really like the digital look of that, and I didn't think it was that scary.
And I also cringed at the part where there starts to become a lot of exposition towards the end, where like they literally kind of explain like the twists, which I didn't find that compelling because of the way they explained them. And then they like explain the monster, and they like cut to a picture of the monster, so we like know exactly what they're talking about. There was some stuff that was really like on the nose. Some people that I've talked to really love this. Like, they feel like it's the perfect mash of genres and like fun that they wanted to see, and it's just like a good thrill horror show. So I definitely think there are Edgar Wright fans who are really gonna get a kick out of this. But you were saying you were appreciating the sound. I got very overwhelmed by the sound. I thought it was like cacophonous.
Maybe by the end it was a lot. A lot was a lot by the end.
Like, it was like blaring in my ears, and I was like, oh my god, can I like escape this?
I didn't hate where the movie ended up, like twist wise, but I do think that it was a little bit of like a concrete explanation to something that felt so horrifyingly psychological in the beginning.
Overall, like, this is a bit of a disappointment for me. I was looking forward to this from the trailer. It ended up feeling quite messy. I don't think any aspect of the film is like poorly done at all. It just feels like bad choices to me, and a little bit of poor taste thrown in there. But I do think I'm gonna be mostly in the minority thinking that. Like, I'm probably a little more negative than most people.
And in terms of Oscars, you know, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, where is this getting nominated? Like, does it have a chance anywhere? For a movie like this, for a psychological thriller, for a genre film to break into the Oscar race, it's got to be like one of the best of the year, and it's not that. And even though some of the technical elements and the crafts are impressive, it's just not gonna be something that's nominated at the Oscars. Like, it's not gonna get a campaign, and the voters are just going to overlook it, so I'm just not gonna be predicting this one for anything.
Even if I really like the movie, even if this was like, you know, a 9 out of 10 for me, I don't know what I'd be like gung-ho about the Academy Awards doing or not with this movie or nominating it for. Even the cinematography, editing, and sound, I just didn't feel like it was peak game for Edgar Wright.
I'm going with a 7 out of 10 on it.
I wouldn't go out of my way to like recommend this movie to someone, so I don't know if I'm like a 5 or a 6. I guess I'll go with a 6 though. The craft was interesting, and I really did like Thomasin McKenzie in it.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Where will you spend your last night?